Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the sands of time, to a land of pyramids, the steady flow of the Nile, and a daily life that demanded far more endurance than most of us could imagine. This isn't a challenge, it's an invitation to slow down, to listen, and to let the past move at its own calm, ancient pace. Before we begin, if you enjoy these gentle journeys into the past, where stories are told slowly enough to help you drift off, be sure to subscribe to History for Sleeping. Here you'll find carefully crafted, boring history for sleep videos, each designed with the care of a true sleepy historian. And if you ever want more soft-spoken historical storytelling to unwind with, just search history to fall asleep. You'll always find us there. Now, settle in. Let your breathing slow, and we'll wander together into ancient Egypt until sleep finds you. You lie there on a reed mat, already a little frayed, listening to the early wind brush softly against the mud walls of the small house. The wind isn't strong, just the long sigh of the Nile before the day begins. It carries the damp, earthy scent of riverbank reeds, a smell that, if you were born here, you could recognize even in your sleep. That scent mingles with the smoke left from last night's fire and a trace of dry dust. Not exactly pleasant, but familiar. The smell of home, the smell of morning, the smell of another day in ancient Egypt. Over you is a thin sheet of linen, its color faded from white to pale yellow after many washings in river water. It's not like the crisp hotel bedding of the modern world, but coarse, faintly rough, and so light you sometimes wonder if it's warming you at all, or simply lying there so you have something to pull over yourself. Last night, it kept the chill of dew away. Now, as the wind seeps through the doorway, it clings to your skin with the moisture still trapped in the air. You know it won't last long. Soon, when the sun rises, the damp will vanish, leaving only the dry heat of a kiln. You open your eyes. The first light of day is not yet bright, just a thin ribbon of pale gold slipping through the narrow gap in the door curtain. But your body has learned the language of land and sky. You need no clock, no alarm, only the subtle warning of warmth approaching. A thin, weightless heat, like a reminder that today will be like yesterday, and yesterday like the day before. Here, calendars don't hang on walls. They live in the breath of the earth, in the rhythm of the river, in the endless turn of flood and drought. Your house is simple. Mud walls mixed with straw, a roof woven from tightly bound reeds. 2 rooms, one for sleeping, one for cooking and work. The floor is packed earth, cool in the early morning but burning hot by afternoon. Under the mat lies a fine layer of sand mixed with mud dust. It will cling to your hair, your clothes, your dreams. Here, sand never asks permission to come inside. It's everywhere. You hear movement outside, the cluck of hens, footsteps on the dirt path, and farther away, the soft lap of water against the shore. The Nile, the shared alarm clock of the whole village. In the mornings, everyone goes to the river, to fetch water, to wash, to prepare for the fields. No one needs a phone's chime, just the ibis calling to each other, and the silver light on the water. You sit up. Beside the mat, a small reed basket, a bronze knife, a wooden comb, and a clay jar of moringa oil, a rare fragrance, saved for when it's truly needed. You draw back the coarse cloth covering the doorway. No hinges, no lock, just a curtain to keep out dust and hold in a little privacy. The moment it shifts aside, the air rushes in, bringing the river's smell, the faint tang of fish, the green scent of water plants, the dampness of mud, the smell of life. Not the smell of bottled water, but the scent that keeps the village alive. Before you, the eastern sky is brightening. Palm trees and reed thickets cut fine black lines across the gold. The water shimmers with a layer of trembling silver. A few white ibis wade along the bank, dipping their beaks into the river. Frogs call. Birds gather. Far downstream, a small boat drifts with the current. The rower stands at the stern, his paddle marking each of the last quiet seconds before the heat begins. You know you must make use of the time. When the sun climbs higher, the water in the jars will grow warm, and the path to the river will blaze. You take the large clay jar from the corner of the porch and step onto the cracked dirt road. Others are walking too, greeting one another with a glance or a short word, not out of coldness, but because everyone knows every cool moment is worth keeping. Your father used to say, "Egypt lives because of the Nile, but the Nile belongs to no one." It sounds simple, but it's the truth. Everything depends on the river, but no one commands it. The flood brings fertile soil. The drought brings trial. The village survives because it understands that rhythm. You bend down to wash your face. The water is cool, but not clear. No one here expects water like in the adverts. You cup your hands, splash it onto your face. There is no soap, but there is sand, nature's cleanser. You rub it gently on your skin, feeling its grain, rough yet clean. There are no spas here, but everyone knows how to scrub with sand to begin the day. Beside you, women are washing clothes. They beat the cloth against stone, wring it dry, then lay it across the reeds to catch the sun. The sound of fabric striking rock, the splash of water, the low murmur of voices. Farther along, children play on the sandbank, laughing loud. That laughter, you hear it every morning. It repeats like the river's flow, like the sun's light, like the sand in your home. You lower the jar into the water. When full, it's heavy, but your shoulders are used to it. Balancing it on your head is a skill everyone here has. You turn back toward the house, your steps steady. Behind you, the sun has risen above the horizon. Its deep gold light spreads over rooftops, fields, and the river itself. You know that from now, the heat will grow. But in this moment, you are still in the calmest part of the day. The only cool part. The only part where you can breathe deep and think, "This is the smell of home. This is the smell of life." The path from your house to the river is not long, just a short stretch. But one you walk every day, and every day it's a little different. This morning, the ground beneath your feet is drier. The flood season has been over for more than a month, and cracks now spread clearly across the path, winding like tiny rivers through a miniature desert. Each step makes a faint crunch, like the breaking of crisp bread. Except this is the sound of earth, a sound that marks the true arrival of the dry season. You pass a stand of reeds, tall as your head. Their stalks are soft yet firm, their long, narrow leaves ready to slice your hand if you brush too close. From within the thicket, a white ibis steps out, unhurried, its long, curved beak tracing an invisible line through the air. It pays you no mind. It has its own task, searching for small fish or insects carried to shore by the night's waves. Farther along, a few white herons stand still as statues, waiting for the moment a careless fish comes near. It's not a rare sight, but each time you see it, you still feel peace. Egyptian peace. Not absolute silence, but a calm born from the steady repetition of life, as constant as the rhythm of a boat's oars. From a distance, you can already see the riverbank. The morning water is neither blue nor gray, but a slightly opaque silver, the color of silt and light woven together. Across its surface, ripples spread from the wingbeat of a bird. A small wooden boat is moored near the shore, its rope tied to a post darkened and polished by years of water. The boatman sits, mending a fishing net. No one hurries. Here, the morning is when people and the river share each moment. You take water, the river gives water. You wash, the river carries away dust and sweat. You step down onto the sandy bank. It's not wide, but large enough for a dozen people to work side by side. To the right, 2 women squat at the water's edge, striking cloth against stone. The bop-bop of fabric is layered with the sound of splashing water. They don't speak loudly, only a few quiet exchanges, as though not to disturb the current. To the left, an older man uses a small bamboo scoop to fill a clay jar. He moves slowly, very slowly, not from weakness, but because this is the safe pace to keep the water from spilling. You know that motion well. Everyone learns it as a child and keeps it for life. You choose a clear spot near the water's edge. First comes the ritual of washing hands and face. No one here plunges straight in to bathe. The Nile is not a swimming pool, and in ancient Egypt there are clear taboos. Never make noise when entering the water in the morning. Never bathe where others are drawing drinking water. And always keep away from whirlpools, the places believed to be the home of Sobek, the crocodile god. Sobek is not a gentle figure. He is a god who both protects and punishes. It's believed that if you offend the river, Sobek will send you a sign, perhaps a real crocodile, or perhaps some mishap you'll never forget. You crouch down and dip your hands into the water. Its coolness numbs your fingers for a moment. You scoop it up and splash your face. The droplets run from your forehead to your chin, carrying away dust, sweat, and the last traces of laziness from sleep. Here, water doesn't just clean. It wakes. It wakes you. It wakes the village. It wakes the day itself. When you're done, you take the clay jar. Its round mouth is just wide enough to fill quickly, but not so wide that water will spill when carried. You lower it into the river, feeling the gentle push of the current against your hand. When it's full, it's heavy, and you shift to the practiced stance, balanced on your shoulder, steadied by one hand, or lifted to your head with a twisted cloth pad as cushion. The ancient Egyptians, especially women, are known for carrying heavy loads this way. It's not only skill. The path from river to home is rarely smooth, and one wrong step could spill the work of an entire morning. You glance around. Everyone here is performing some part of the shared morning ritual. Some wash clothes, some draw water, some clean cooking tools. No one gives orders, no one signals, yet it all unfolds like a ceremony rehearsed for thousands of years. And in truth, it has been repeated for thousands of years. Since the first pharaohs, people have come to the river like this. The details may change, a new roof, a different jar, but the essence remains. The Nile is the village's heart, and morning is its first beat each day. You recall your grandmother's words. When you take water, thank the river. When you drink water, remember the river. And when the river is angry, stay away. They sound like a story, but here they are law. Not laws written on papyrus, but laws for living. You don't insult the river. You don't throw waste into it. And if you can, you offer a little bread or a few grains, a small gift to the gods who guard it. A boy passes, carrying a small jar. He smiles at you before leaning down to scoop water. He's quicker than you, but less careful. A little spills over the side. He doesn't mind. Here, water lost along the way is no great matter, so long as there's enough left to use. But in a harsh, dry season, every drop spilled would be cause for regret. The sun is climbing higher now. Its light hits the water, turning the ripples dazzling. You know this is the sign to leave the bank. The water is drawn. The morning ritual is done. You'll carry the jar home and divide it for the day's work. Drinking, cooking, mixing dough. and if any remains, saving it for the afternoon. On the way back, you think of something simple. Tomorrow, you will do exactly the same. The same cracked path, the same white ibis, the same sound of cloth on stone. The cycle doesn't change, and perhaps that's why it endures. The Nile promises nothing new each morning, but it gives you something more precious: certainty. And in a world where weather, harvests, and life itself depend on this river, that certainty is the rarest luxury you could have. The water jar rests in the corner of the porch. Light has begun to spill through the open doorway, casting long stripes across the packed earth floor. You step inside, hearing the cloth door stir faintly in the breeze. The air inside smells nothing like the river. Here, there is the scent of cooled hearth ash, of ground barley, and of yesterday's bread. A smell faintly sour, faintly dry, like the memory of a meal already gone. On the low wooden platform sits a large basket of bread baked the previous afternoon. In ancient Egypt, breakfast rarely began with anything freshly baked. Bread was made ahead, cooled, and eaten over time. This kind was made from emmer, an ancient wheat. Its grains are smaller than modern wheat, its husk tougher, and when ground, it often leaves bits of hull behind. To turn it into flour, people used 2 stones, one flat, one curved, grinding back and forth. And this is where sand enters the meal. Sand is never invited. It's already inside the emmer from when it dried on the earthen threshing floor. It hides in the grooves of the grinding stones. It clings to nearly everything in the house. By the time you mix the dough and bake the loaf, the sand is waiting. Not enough to make your teeth grind audibly, but enough to make them work harder. Here, dentists do not yet exist, and toothbrushes are a luxury no one can imagine. The result? By the age of 30, most people's teeth are worn flat, like river stones. Not painful, just worn. And breakfast bread is one of the reasons why. You take a loaf. It's thick, round, its surface dark brown, its inside dense and heavy. There's no yeast like in modern bread, so the crumb isn't airy. When you break it, it doesn't pull apart in shreds, but splits into solid halves. You bite into it, and the first feeling is dry. Very dry. But then, a light sweetness from the barley appears, along with the faintest tang from natural fermentation. And of course, somewhere, a few grains of sand, the seasoning no one asks for, but is always there. To help it go down, you pour some beer into a clay cup. But here, beer isn't golden, chilled, and frothy like in advertisements. Egyptian beer is thick, cloudy, almost like a thin porridge of fermented barley. The barley is cooked, cooled, yeast is added, and it's roughly strained. The result is something you both drink and chew, with a gentle sourness, a hint of yeast, and enough nourishment to stand in for a full meal. Children drink it too, not to look bold, but because river water isn't always safe, and beer has already been boiled. Your breakfast today includes a few dried dates. They aren't the large, plump, syrupy kind sold in modern shops. These are small, with wrinkled skin, sweet but modestly so. They're a gift from a relative visiting from an oasis. For you, a few dates in the morning are as close as breakfast gets to dessert, though there's little here to follow. You eat, drink, and listen to the sounds around you. In the corner, your mother is grinding more flour for the next batch of bread. The scrape of stone against stone is steady, slow. Outside, a rooster calls. Farther off, the thud of a wooden mallet from a small workshop. Together, they make a kind of background music you've heard all your life. The rhythm of life doesn't change. And each morning, neither does the meal. Yet, between classes, breakfast is different. The wealthy, officials, great merchants, might eat whiter bread, from well-sifted flour with little sand. They add honey, dairy, or dried meat. Sometimes they have fresh fruit, raisins, or nuts. Their drink might be finer beer, well-filtered, or imported wine from the Mediterranean. The poor, like your family, have dark bread, thick beer, and, if lucky, a few dates or an onion. Breakfast in ancient Egypt is not a time to enjoy in the modern sense. No hot coffee, no morning paper, no lingering conversation. It is refueling. You eat to work. You drink to keep going. Everything is quick, eaten while preparing for the day's labor in the fields, on the building sites, or in the workshops. You chew another bite of bread, feeling the faint grit between your teeth. It's no surprise anymore. It's as much a part of you as the midday heat, as the wind through the reeds. You take a drink of thick beer, letting its gentle tang wash down the dryness. Then a date, for the sweetness to stay on your tongue. Dry, sour, sweet, the cycle of flavors you know well. You recall the old saying, "Egypt builds its pyramids from stone and lives on bread and beer." It's no metaphor. Bread and beer truly are the foundation of most people's diet. Both can be made in great quantity, kept for days, and give the energy needed to endure. For all the sand, the sourness, the monotony, they are pillars of life. Breakfast ends when the room is bright enough for you to see each speck of dust hanging in the air. Outside, the calls between neighbors grow more insistent. Work waits. You stand, brush crumbs from your hands, and drink the last swallow of beer. The tang still lingers on your tongue, and somewhere a little sand remains between your teeth. You don't mind, because tomorrow, and many mornings after, you'll begin again with this same taste: dry, sour, sweet, and sand. The first gentleness of sunlight has already passed. On the ground, your shadow shortens little by little. In ancient Egypt, no one needed a clock. A glance at the length of a shadow told you exactly where you were in the day. And for most, that also meant it was time for real work to begin. The dirt path leads you to the riverbank fields. The smell of damp mud is stronger now, mingled with the scent of freshly cut grass and river water lifting into the air. Floodwater still lingers in the irrigation channels, keeping the barley, wheat, and greens moist. Farmers step into the fields, their feet sinking ankle-deep into soft mud, leaving rings of ripples as they move. They wear short linen kilts, their upper bodies bronzed by the sun, sweat beginning to run. But that is nothing unusual. Morning is the best time to work, before the noon heat turns everything into a kiln. The rhythm of work here is not set by personal choice. It keeps time with the sun's position and the commands of the overseer. The head of a group of farmers is often appointed by the village or by the landowner. He doesn't just assign tasks. He monitors output. Now and then, his voice rings out. "This row isn't even. More water in that corner." Simple words, but enough for everyone to know whether to quicken or slow their pace. A little farther away, on drier ground, a team of stoneworkers labors at a building site. They are not raising a pyramid. There isn't always a pyramid to build, but a small temple for a local god. The scene is entirely different from the fields. Here, the ring of hammers striking stone, the scrape of chisels on granite, and the haze of stone dust fill the air. Massive blocks are hauled with ropes, sliding along sand-scattered paths to lessen the drag. There are no cranes, no lifts, only human strength in solid arms and steady legs. The stoneworkers labor in crews. One cuts stone at the quarry, one hauls it, one carves the designs. Each has its own overseer, usually with a staff, not for striking, but as a symbol of authority and a means of signaling from a distance. If you worked here, you would grow used to looking up to see the overseer's figure above. pointing with his hand, or giving a turn of the staff. In the village, the women begin their own rhythm of work. Many grind grain while keeping an eye on small children. The sound of stone over grain is the bass beat, joined by a child's laughter or crying, and now and then a call from one yard to another. Grinding is no light task. Kneeling at a low board, using the whole body to push the grinding stone back and forth, turning grain into flour. Beside her, a child plays with a reed stalk or a lump of earth, always within the mother's reach. When the child totters near the door, her hands keep their grinding rhythm, but her eyes are already on the little one. There is a strange coordination to it all. Whether in the fields, the building site, or the village, everyone works to the rhythm of the sun. Early morning, the heaviest work with the most energy. As the sun climbs, lighter tasks, or a short rest. No bells mark the time, but when the light shifts, when the shadows shorten, everyone senses the same thing. It is time to move to the next stage. Among the work crews, certain gestures repeat like rituals. The farmer pauses every few rows to adjust the cord on his hoe. The stoneworker wipes dust from a surface, knowing it will settle again in moments. The woman grinding grain fixes the scarf over her head, keeping her hair from the flour. These motions, day after day, make up the language of labor, unspoken, yet understood by all. You cross the fields, hearing the trickle of water in the narrow channels. That sound, together with the insects and birds, is the music of the morning. It reminds you that though the work is hard, you are part of a balanced system. The river gives water, the sun gives light, people give labor, and the harvest gives back food. On the work site, a great stone is pulled into place. The chant of numbers rises in unison. 1, 2, 3, and all pull together. The block shifts slowly but steadily. The overseer nods in approval. No one stops to celebrate. Such a small success is only one step in a long chain of work. And as the sun rises higher, the labor will pause briefly for shade, for water, and then continue. In the village, a woman finishes her morning's flour. She pushes it into a basket, brushes the fine dust from her arms, and turns to catch her child running toward her. A moment's rest before she begins kneading dough for lunch or for the next day. Here, rest is never long. Work flows on. It only changes speed, never truly stops. You realize that in all this, the overseers do not need to shout often. The rules are already in everyone's bones. Work when the sun tells you to work, rest when the sun tells you to rest. The overseer simply repeats what all already know. And when the afternoon comes, it will be the sun, not any bell or horn, that signals the day's end. When you leave the fields and look back, what strikes you is not the individuals, but the vast woven cloth of movement. The browns of earth, the greens of plants, the white of headscarves, the gray of stone, all blended together. Though each person works at something different, all are threaded into the same fabric, the thread of sunlight, of command, and of the unchanging rhythm of life. Tomorrow this scene will repeat, and the day after, and for many years to come. Not because there is no other choice, but because here, survival depends on keeping step with the rhythm of sky and river. The sun is higher now. You stand on the porch, adjusting the linen wrap at your waist. In the morning breeze, the fabric shifts lightly, like a butterfly's wing. Linen is all the ancient Egyptians needed, and all they could have, to guard against the heat. It is thin, airy, cool when first worn. But that is theory. In reality, linen is nearly helpless against the three things always present here: sand, sweat, and insects. You tug gently at the hem, brushing away the fine dust that has settled after just one morning. Egypt's sand isn't coarse, not like the grainy beaches elsewhere. It's powder fine, slipping through every thread of the weave. A single light breeze is enough to carry it into your tunic, into the folds of your wrap, and into places you wouldn't speak of aloud. You brush it off, it falls away. You step outside, it returns. Here, sand doesn't leave you. It sleeps with you, walks with you, sometimes eats with you. Your clothing is simple. Men usually wear a short linen kilt or loincloth. Women wear long dresses, sometimes with shoulder straps, sometimes simply wrapped and tied. The wealthy might wear bright white linen, well washed, sometimes pleated for effect. The poor, like you, usually wear linen that has faded in color, heavier, rougher, without pleats or embroidery. Footwear? Usually none. A pair of sandals made from palm leaves or soft leather is saved for long journeys or the temple. On your skin, you rub a little moringa oil. Not much. Oil is precious, but enough to leave a faint sheen and a light scent. Oil isn't only for fragrance. It keeps the skin supple, softens it, and, importantly, helps the sand scrape less harshly. The rich scent their oil with lotus, cinnamon, or resin. The poor use plain oil, or diluted. The smell of oil blends with the smell of sweat, of earth, of the river, becoming the perfume of ancient Egypt. No glass bottles, no ornate advertisements, just small clay jars, stored carefully, rationed drop by drop. But no matter how fragrant, you cannot escape. The flies. Here along the river, they are the most numerous inhabitants. They are drawn to the smell of food, sweat, oil, in truth, to almost anywhere. Their buzzing is not loud, but it is constant, like a background song you cannot turn off. Ancient Egyptians had no insect screens, but they had their own ways to keep them at bay. Burning incense to drive them off, hanging bundles of fragrant herbs at the doorway, or rubbing the skin with a mix of oil and plants. Some even smeared thin mud over their arms and legs while working in the fields, both as sunblock and as a deterrent to pests. You walk out into the street. The sunlight glances off the linen, making it nearly transparent where the weave is thinnest. No one is embarrassed by this. Here, the body is ordinary, not something to hide completely. What matters is staying cool and relatively clean. Clean here means not letting sweat smell overpower, not letting sand cake thick on the skin, and not letting clothes show dirt too clearly. On the building site, the stoneworkers are dressed exactly as in the morning, except their linen is darker now with sweat. They occasionally unwrap their headcloths, wring out the dampness, then tie them again. In the village, women working adjust their dresses to keep them neat, the wind and sand tugging the fabric out of place. Every movement is instinctive, as if practiced a lifetime. No one talks about fashion, but everyone knows how to dress for the work at hand. By midday, the heat makes the linen cling to your skin like a second layer. You feel the sweat soaking through, carrying dust with it. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar. You've learned to ignore it, just as you ignore the flies, the wind-borne sand in your house, and the knowledge that tomorrow will be the same. And when the afternoon comes, you will wash the linen in the river, hang it on the reeds to dry, and put it on again in the morning. The same cloth, the same color, the same threads of sand. Sand, sweat, and scented oil, the threefold loop of a lifetime here. You accept it, as everyone does, because in ancient Egypt you could not always choose what surrounded you. But you learned to live with it, day after day, in your linen kilt, under the sun, between the sand and the insects. And as you adjust the linen wrap, brushing off a few stubborn grains at the end of the day, you know that tomorrow, everything will repeat. Under this same sky, with the same drone of flies and the same familiar scent of oil, walked people hundreds of years before you. They wore the same fabric, drank the same thick beer, and carried on their shoulders a weight heavier than any block of stone. One among them would become a name the entire empire would speak. Now, come with me, away from the rhythm of an ordinary day, and into the story of Hatshepsut, whose life was bound to both the glory and the cost of ancient Egypt. Dawn in Thebes is not like dawn in the villages along the river. The light does not pour through open windows, but filters through closed doors, falling across the cool stone floor that has been swept clean since the night before. Outside, the Nile still drifts in silence. But here, inside the royal palace, every sound is small, arranged as if part of a ceremony. You picture yourself there, standing beside a red-painted colonnade, looking out over the inner garden. A sycamore casts its shade. The scent of lotus flowers drifts from a small pond. A line of handmaidens passes by, carrying clay jars filled with cool water, the necks of the jars damp with morning dew. At the center of this quiet order is a girl of 7 or 8, Hatshepsut, daughter of Pharaoh Thutmose I and Queen Amosa. Her childhood begins in a place most Egyptian children only hear of in stories, the palace of a pharaoh at the height of his power. But even as the king's daughter, her mornings begin not with play, but with lessons. In a shaded room behind heavy curtains, she sits at a low table, a waxed wooden tablet before her. Her pen is a sharpened reed, its tip dipped in black ink. Each hieroglyph, each sign is a step toward entering the world of the literate, the world of those who will one day govern a land. In ancient Egypt, teaching the royal daughters to read was not only for the sake of religious texts. It prepared them to manage estates, to sign decrees, to take part in state rituals. Hatshepsut learns not only the written signs, but simple arithmetic for keeping account of grain stores, for recognizing the numbers on a tax register. She studies the lunar calendar, the flood season, how to decide when to sow and when to harvest, knowledge that will form the base of her authority when she is grown. After writing comes religion. In a narrow room where sunlight falls through a small opening, Hatshepsut listens to an old priest speak of Amun, the patron god of Thebes, the center of royal power. She learns the hymns, the ways to kneel, the offerings to make. For her, religion is not only belief, it is the root of politics. In Egypt, the pharaoh is not merely a king, he is the living Horus, chosen by the gods. To understand the rituals is to understand how to hold one's place in the order of the universe. When she steps into the palace gardens, she walks among trees her father has brought from distant lands. There is sandalwood from Nubia, flowers from Punt, even plants never before seen in the Nile Valley. Each tree carries a story, and the young princess is taught that to govern land is to govern its stories. Every garden, every canal in the palace is a miniature of the kingdom, a source of water, caretakers, and a harvest to be claimed. In the afternoons, she follows her mother or the court ladies to the temples for ceremonies. There, she watches how the offerings are laid: bread, beer, meat, and incense, each placed with perfect balance and order. She learns that an offering is not only to please the gods, but to display royal power. The one who can give the greatest gift is the one who holds the greatest authority. In the palace's long corridors, she also hears the tales of her father's campaigns, to Nubia, to Syria, faraway lands from which gold, ivory, and precious woods are brought home. She is still young, but she understands already that Egypt is not only fields and temples, it is a web of trade and conquest, and the one on the throne must keep all of it steady. Life in the palace is not always sweet. Every meal, every lesson follows strict form. Servants are always nearby, and their presence is also a watchful eye. Even at play in the courtyard, Hatshepsut knows she is observed. To be the Pharaoh's daughter is to have every gesture, every word remembered and recalled if needed. What sets Hatshepsut apart from many other princesses is her curiosity. Where others are drawn to jewels or games, she lingers before the carved maps on the wall, asking the names of faraway places. When the maids tell folk tales, she wants to know if the voyage from Punt truly takes months. And when she is allowed into the temple library, she lays her hands on papyrus scrolls, her eyes wide at the lines of writing that only a few can read. All the mornings of study, the afternoons in the temples, the journeys with her mother, they are not random. They are a quiet training, shaping her for a role no one yet imagines she will take. A role that, at the time, no woman was expected to hold for long. Standing on the stone steps looking out over the garden, Hatshepsut breathes deeply. The scent of lotus mingles with the damp smell of watered soil, with the breeze off the Nile threading through the rows of columns. Before her lies a world waiting, a world of ritual, of land, of trade routes stretching to the horizon. And the young girl doesn't yet know that one day she will not only walk those routes, but stand at the place where they all begin and where they all end. Noon in Thebes. Sunlight spills through the high colonnades of the palace, falling in pale gold bands across the cool stone floor. Inside, the air is dimmer, cooler, scented faintly with incense like a drifting veil. In the great hall, where rows of columns are carved with papyrus and lotus blossoms, Hatshepsut, now grown, wears a fine, sheer linen dress, bound at the waist with a gold sash, walking at the measured pace set by a handmaiden carrying an ostrich feather fan. The royal girl of years past is now the great royal wife, the principal consort of Pharaoh Thutmose II, her husband and half-brother. In ancient Egypt, such unions were not for romance, but for the continuity of the royal line, keeping the throne within the direct bloodline. For Hatshepsut, this marriage is a turning point, from a princess trained to observe to a queen expected to take part in governance. In the palace, the title Great Royal Wife is not ornamental. It is a role of both ritual and politics, appearing at ceremonies alongside the pharaoh, standing with him in religious rites, and, most crucially, managing the royal household and much of the palace's wealth. Hatshepsut quickly proves she is more than a figure to be displayed. She has a command of ritual, an exact memory for the names of nobles and priests, and the ability to manage affairs without letting strain show. To the outside eye, Pharaoh Thutmose II appears at the center, but those watching closely can see Hatshepsut's hand in many decisions. When the pharaoh goes out for the procession of Amun, she remains to receive merchant delegations from Nubia, overseeing the intake of rare goods like ebony, gold, and incense. When there is a dispute over land between two noble families, she is called to mediate, not because law demands it, but because her word carries weight. One morning, in a chamber lined with images of the gods, Hatshepsut stands beside a tablet recording last season's taxes. The measures of grain, oil, and beer, all written in hieroglyphs and numeric signs. She questions the scribe briefly, then nods. Only the attentive understand. She is verifying accuracy, ensuring that no one has taken advantage of the pharaoh's absence to skim for themselves. At ceremonies in the Temple of Karnak, Hatshepsut's regalia is more elaborate. A full-length white linen gown, a sheer outer cloak, a gold collar worked with the figure of a protective deity, and a headdress shaped like a falcon or a crown worn alongside the pharaoh. She does not simply stand still. She recites prayers, presents offerings, and at times directs the order of rites, a duty not every queen could perform. The role demands delicacy. Pharaoh Thutmose II is neither robust nor energetic. Records suggest his reign is brief and his health fragile. This means that often Hatshepsut must appear in his place, or at least stand nearly equal beside him. In a royal court, any gap in power is both opportunity and risk. She must strike a balance, strong enough to manage in his stead, but never so obvious as to invite resentment. Within the harem, Hatshepsut maintains a network of attendants, house stewards, and craftsmen. The inner palace is not merely living quarters. It is a production center for textiles, jewelry, and ritual offerings. By keeping it tightly run, she preserves order and ensures a steady supply of goods for the temples, reinforcing the prestige of the crown. A day in her role begins with a short meeting with the chief steward of the household, followed by audiences with envoys or merchants, then preparations for an afternoon religious rite. Between these are smaller decisions with large effects: assigning grain rations for temple builders, allotting oil for the temple lamps, or deciding on the gift to send in reply to a distant noble. In the cooler hours of evening, Hatshepsut walks with the pharaoh through the palace gardens. Trees from far-off lands rise in the courtyards. Pools reflect the moonlight. It is not only a time of rest, but a moment to speak of state matters in a place with fewer ears. Though the official record credits decisions to the pharaoh, it is likely that in walks like these, Hatshepsut advises, steers, or even proposes campaigns and building projects. She also keeps careful ties with the priesthood, especially in the Temple of Amun, where religious power stands nearly alongside royal power. The respect and cooperation of the priests will be a store of influence she keeps for the future, even if no one yet imagines a female pharaoh. Amid the robes, gold, and rites, there are still small domestic interludes. Hatshepsut embroidering a motif with her maids, testing a new blend of perfumed oil, or sitting to listen to harp music beneath the colonnade. Yet even these private moments in the royal palace carry the weight of formality. Every act, however personal, is witnessed and remembered. Her place beside Thutmose II is a lesson in indirect power, the kind that does not call its own name, but runs quietly through every channel of the court. She learns to place the right person in the right post, to turn a decision without giving an order, to keep all believing that the pharaoh's hand alone guides the realms. From the outside, she is the dutiful queen, wife to the pharaoh, partner in ceremony. Beneath that, she is a woman who has mastered the art of holding and using power, a skill that will decide her fate when the moment comes. Many years had passed since those quiet noons in the palace gardens. Now Thebes awoke to a day unlike any before it. At dawn, a light mist lay across the stone steps leading into the temple of Karnak. The steady beat of ceremonial drums carried far, like the heartbeat of a great ritual. Processions of priests in white robes moved slowly through towering carved columns, each holding incense, the resin's scent mingling with the cool air before the sun rose. In the center of the stone-paved court, a throne stood ready, gilded, inlaid with precious stones, awaiting the one who would take it. No one expected that the figure emerging from the long temple corridor would not be a king in a white kilt and red cloak, but Hatshepsut, widow of Pharaoh Thutmose II, stepmother to the still young Thutmose III. Yet today, she did not wear the long linen gown of a queen. Instead, she wore the short kilt of a man, a red cloak embroidered with gold thread, and on her head, the shent, the double crown, symbol of supreme authority over both Upper and Lower Egypt. Her steps were steady, neither hurried nor slow, eyes fixed forward, as if all had been arranged long ago. The temple columns echoed her tread, each footfall resounding like a quiet affirmation. Egypt was about to have a new pharaoh, and this time, a woman. Egyptian tradition did not forbid women from ruling, but few had held the throne for long. When a pharaoh died, leaving an heir too young to rule, the queen would usually serve as regent, standing behind, governing in her son's name. Hatshepsut did not choose to stand behind. She declared herself pharaoh, not only in words, but on stone, on stele, on monuments that would endure for centuries. To do this, she needed a strategy of legitimacy, crafted to the smallest detail. First, she tied herself to sacred myth. The priests of Amun proclaimed that the god himself, in the form of Pharaoh Thutmose I, her father, had united with the queen to conceive Hatshepsut. She was thus not only the daughter of a pharaoh, but the daughter of a god. This placed her on equal footing with any male ruler in history, even above them, for she had been chosen by the god from birth. Second, she altered her own image in art. In reliefs and statues, Hatshepsut began to appear in male form, a flat chest, the short kilt, the false beard of kingship. Not to hide her gender, but to align herself with the deeply ingrained image of Pharaoh as a strong male sovereign. The people were accustomed to seeing their ruler this way, and she gave them that, even if, in life, her voice and gait remained those of a woman. Third, she anchored her rule in stone. From the very start of her reign, she launched massive building projects, expanding Karnak, erecting colossal red granite obelisks from Aswan, each rising over 29 meters, their surfaces carved with her titles. Daughter of Amun, she who maintains Ma'at, the order of the universe. On stone, her titulary was written like that of any male pharaoh, without the word female. It was a visual declaration that she was not a regent, but the rightful king. Fourth, she managed the position of Thutmose III with care. She did not depose or ignore the boy. Officially, they were co-rulers. In practice, every decree, every ceremony was led by Hatshepsut. Keeping his name beside hers on monuments made her reign appear as partnership rather than usurpation. It softened resistance from traditionalists, while leaving her in full control. Fifth, she secured the priesthood. By granting land, offerings, and tax exemptions to the great temples, above all to Amun's temple in Thebes, Hatshepsut ensured that the most powerful religious voices would stand with her. In a society where a king's authority was bound to the god's favor, keeping this support was almost the same as keeping the throne. On the day of coronation, when Hatshepsut sat upon the throne, the cry, Ankh Uja Seneb, life, prosperity, health, rose from thousands of priests and officials. Red and gold streamers lifted in the wind. In the early light, the double crown on her head gleamed like flame. It was more than a historic moment. It was the moment a woman broke the pattern, using every tool of politics, religion, art, and symbol to turn what had never been done into something unquestionable. From that day, her name would not be Queen, but Pharaoh Hatshepsut, the one of Ma'at, the daughter of Amun. Her name carved in stone would outlast all whispers in the court, and with every obelisk raised, every stela inscribed, she was rewriting the definition of who could rule Egypt. Morning sunlight stretched across the Nile, each small ripple catching gold like strips of woven silk. From the east came the scent of resin and cinnamon, things that did not grow in Egypt, but came from a faraway place called Punt. At the docks, merchant ships lay side by side, their hulls inlaid with fragrant wood, their sails full in the wind. Men unloaded sacks of incense, polished blocks of ebony, cages holding monkeys and leopards, even potted trees with their roots wrapped in damp earth. The air was busy but unhurried, the rhythm of an empire confident at its height. During Hatshepsut's reign, Egypt did not sink into endless war. Instead, it poured its strength into trade and construction. The expedition to Punt was the pinnacle. So significant it was carved in detail on the walls of Deir el-Bahari. In the reliefs, great ships cut through the waves, landing at a lush shore where the people of Punt, in long hair and bright clothes, greeted the Egyptian envoys. They offered the treasures of their land in exchange for grain, cloth, and crafted goods from the Nile Valley. Hatshepsut understood that wealth did not come only from gold or land, but from subtler things: fragrance, rare woods, exotic plants, things that brought prestige and splendor to palaces and temples. And when the goods from Punt arrived in Thebes, they enriched not only the royal treasury, but served as proof that this pharaoh could carry the empire to the far ends of the map. But trade was only part of her legacy. Hatshepsut's mark would be set in stone, most of all in the temple of Deir el-Bahari, built against the cliffs of the Nile's west bank, facing Thebes. Unlike traditional temples, Deir el-Bahari rose in 3 broad terraces, linked by gentle ramps, lined with perfect rows of columns, blending into the pale limestone of the cliffs behind. In the morning, the columns cast long shadows across the courts. By evening, the whole temple glowed with the warm color of honey, radiant without glare. The building took years, drawing hundreds of stonecutters, carvers, painters, and sculptors. Every wall was covered in scenes of Hatshepsut, both as the male pharaoh and as the queen, telling of great events: her coronation, the voyage to Punt, sacred rituals. On columns and walls alike, her name was carved deep, with titles: Chosen of Amun, she who makes Mayat live forever. Beyond her monuments, Hatshepsut patronized the arts. The sculpture workshops of Thebes were busier than ever, producing statues of gods, lions, and of Hatshepsut herself, in many forms, from the formal seated pose to the upright stance of authority. Goldsmiths crafted jewelry for the rituals, using Nubian gold, gems from Sinai, and green stone from the eastern desert. It was a time when beauty and power walked together. On the day of Deir el-Bahari's dedication, Thebes seemed to slow. From early morning, crowds came to the west bank. Priests in spotless white, wearing small lotus crowns, carried rings of incense. Musicians led the procession, striking hand drums and shaking sistrums, their metallic chime blending with the wind. The scents of resin, cinnamon, and myrrh drifted through the air. Hatshepsut emerged from the colonnade, dressed in pure white ceremonial robes with a red cloak, the double crown upon her head. She passed between the columns, her shadow stretched long, moving toward the altar at the steps of the temple's upper terrace. When she raised a cup of wine to offer to Amun, the music ceased, leaving only the sound of wind through the cliffs. Her prayer rose low and steady, invoking Ma'at, balance and order, the goal she claimed for her reign. After the rites, the procession moved through the courts, climbing each terrace so the people could see. From above, looking out over the valley and the blue thread of the Nile, it was clear. This was the work of a prosperous age, when Egypt was not only strong, but refined. In the noon sun, the white walls of Deir el-Bahari shone as if they held within them the story of a pharaoh who had chosen another path, not conquest by sword, but by trade, by art, by political skill. And that story, carved into stone, would remain long after the day of dedication was over. Afternoon on the west bank of Thebes. The sun sinks toward the desert, its amber light stretching across the stone terraces. The air carries the warmth of the day, mixed with the dryness of the desert wind. From afar, the pale columns of Deir el-Bahari stand bright against the foot of the cliffs. But up close, not all is whole. Every step across the stone-paved court brings you to something strange. A face on a relief hammered away, a statue broken at the torso, a line of hieroglyphs with blank spaces where carving should have been. These marks are not the slow wearing of time. They share the same kind of wound, names cut out, the faces and shoulders of the pharaoh struck with a chisel, royal emblems erased. It is clear this was the result of a deliberate campaign, one carried out over years, even decades. Hatshepsut was gone. The throne had passed to Thutmose III, the boy she had once ruled for as regent. At first, when he came to power, Thutmose III left her monuments untouched. But then, at some uncertain point, perhaps more than 20 years after her death, the erasures began. No formal record describes the order. No proclamation survives to explain the reason. But the evidence is in the stone. At Karnak, many of her statues were pulled down, buried, or broken into fragments. Some were recarved into images of other kings. At Deir el-Bahari, reliefs showing her as a male pharaoh were chiseled away and replaced with images of Thutmose IV or Threed. Her name, carved inside the oval cartouche, was cut out, leaving empty spaces on the walls. In ancient Egyptian belief, this was not just removing a name from a king list. The name and image were part of the soul. If the name was erased, the soul lost its place of rest in the afterlife. It was both political act and spiritual erasure. Modern scholars suggest several possibilities. One theory is that Thutmose III wanted to strengthen his standing as the sole legitimate ruler, erasing the interruption of a woman's reign. In Egypt's male-centered tradition, a long-ruling female pharaoh was an exception, one that might encourage future queens to keep the throne for themselves. Another view is that the destruction did not begin until much later, when Thutmose III was older and shaping the official history of his reign. By then, diminishing her presence in public memory could make his era appear as one continuous kingship. Some suggest pressure from a conservative priesthood. Though Hatshepsut had been honored as the daughter of Amun, her blending of male and female imagery, and placing herself on equal ground with male rulers, may have unsettled some factions. Once Thutmose III had full control, removing her could have been a way to appease those traditional powers. Yet the campaign was never complete. Some statues were too large, too built into the architecture to be destroyed without damaging the whole. In those places, her figure remains, sometimes blurred, sometimes painted over. The destruction was uneven. In areas far from the center, her reliefs survive untouched, perhaps because the crews never reached them, or because local stoneworkers slowed their work, quietly preserving pieces of her. And though her name was struck from official lists, her works continued to serve. The trade routes to Punt, the towering obelisks at Karnak, the temple of Deir el-Bahari, all remained, functioning and bringing wealth to the new reign. More than 3,000 years later, archaeologists began to uncover Thebes and Luxor. They found something strange, reliefs with faces chiseled away but carved in the same style, statues buried yet sharing the same features. Piece by piece, they reassembled the fragments, and the name Hatshepsut began to appear again. The truth grew clear. This had been one of the most powerful pharaohs of the new kingdom, ruling for over 2 decades in peace and prosperity, expanding trade and raising great monuments. Ironically, the attempt to erase her made her more intriguing to the future. The blanks in the stone invited questions. Who was here? Why were they removed? And from those questions, her story was rebuilt. her name once more placed in history, this time in its rightful place. Today, standing before Deir el-Bahari, you can watch the light change along its columns. You can see the reliefs of the Punt expedition, still sharp after millennia. You can see the missing figures and know that the gaps themselves tell of power, of memory, and of history's persistence. Hatshepsut's true legacy is not only in the monuments she left, but in the idea she expanded, that the throne of Egypt could belong to a woman if she had the intellect, the strategy, and the will to claim it. Though her name was cut from stone and papyrus, she lives in the story, in the study, and in the mind of anyone who walks the colonnades and looks up, thinking, "She stood here once." And so, the story of Hatshepsut closes not with a full page of words, but with the empty spaces carved into stone. Yet those spaces lead us to another question, older, deeper, stretching beyond her reign. Egypt, with all its pyramids, temples, and mysteries, how much still lies silent beneath the sand and stone? To search for the answer, we will leave Hatshepsut's palace and step into ancient corridors where walls and statues still whisper stories never fully told. Segment 3, Mystery, Archaeology, Culture, Part 11 to 15. Morning, as the sun lifts from the eastern horizon, the mist begins to dissolve over the fields along the Nile. You, an ordinary villager, are carrying water from the irrigation canal to the barley fields. Far in the distance, beyond the mud-brick roofs, beyond the palms and the dusty paths, a massive shape emerges in the light. A block of stone rising into the sky, its summit flashing like a shard of mirror in the dawn. The pyramid. From here, it looks like a mountain made by human hands. If it were newly finished, its limestone casing would still be smooth and white, each block joined so tightly the seams disappear. In the sun, the whole surface would gleam with a light at once soft and dazzling, forcing you to squint. The wind from the river brings the scent of damp earth and young grain, but from the pyramid's direction, you can almost feel another breath. Drier, stiller, like the desert's own exhale. To the common people, the pyramid is more than a structure. It is the enduring sign of the Pharaoh's presence, a ruler you may never have seen, yet whose name is spoken in every ritual, every prayer. The pyramid is where the Pharaoh will rest, but also the gate through which his soul will pass into the afterlife, and, in belief, continue to guard the land from beyond. The ancient Egyptians believed the universe was held in Ma'at, the sacred balance between humanity, nature, and the gods. The Pharaoh upheld Ma'at, and when he died, he had to continue that role forever. The pyramid, with its steadfast form and sides aligned precisely to the cardinal points, was seen as a bridge between earth and sky. Each face was a path for the sun's light, each corner a fixed point in the cosmos. Modern archaeology explains the pyramid as both tomb and religious instrument. Inside lies a system of burial chambers, corridors, offering rooms, and sometimes false rooms meant to mislead thieves. All of it designed not only to guard the mummy and the grave goods, but to symbolize the Pharaoh's journey through the layers of existence, from the darkness underground, through the north-facing passage, toward the imperishable stars. You can imagine, on the day of its dedication, thousands gathered under the sun, the sistrums and hand drums sounding, voices chanting. Priests offered incense at the entrance, thin smoke curling upward into the air, mingling with the light flashing from the stone. The people saw only the outer face, but in their minds, within lay another world, the realm of Osiris, of the stars, of endless fields where the Pharaoh would walk forever. What strikes modern scholars most is the precision. The faces of the Great Pyramid at Giza align almost perfectly with the points of the compass, off by only minutes of arc. Its millions of stone blocks, each weighing tons, are stacked with almost invisible error. Theories of construction still stir debate. An external spiral ramp, an internal ramp, or both. Whatever the method, it demanded an organization and skill few other civilizations of the time could match. Yet the pyramid is not only an engineering feat, it is a symbol of absolute authority. From anywhere in the Nile Delta, if you can see a pyramid, you know you stand in Pharaoh's domain. It is a colossal mark etched into the horizon, reminding all of the order and permanence of the kingship. Even today, standing at its base, looking up to the apex, you can feel a dense kind of silence. The desert wind slides through the stone joints, making a faint sound, almost like a whisper. There is nothing dramatic in it, only a pull that is hard to name, as if the structure still performs its duty, binding past and present, the human and the divine, across thousands of years. In this way, the pyramid is not merely a tomb. It is a promise in stone that part of this world will not change, no matter how the Nile's floods rise and fall, no matter how dynasties shift. And for those who lived under its shadow, that promise was enough to feel secure, that Ma'at still held. In the next part, we will not stand outside looking up, but step inside, into the narrow corridors, the sealed rooms, and the torch-lit walls that once held the secrets of a civilization for millennia. Outside, the Egyptian sun still pours its light across the sloping faces of the pyramid. But the moment you step through the entrance, a narrow gap on the northern side, everything changes. The bright glare vanishes, replaced by a cool, heavy darkness. The desert wind is cut off. All that remains is the sound of your footsteps on stone and the steady echo of your breathing along the walls. The first passage is so low you must stoop. The stone is cut straight, the joints so tight they leave almost no gap. The air smells of dry dust, limestone, and something older, the scent of time sealed away. As your eyes adjust to the archaeologist's lamps, every line becomes clear, every faint wear mark from thousands of years of shifting temperature. Modern archaeologists come here with more than lanterns and paper maps. They bring an arsenal of technology. Ground-penetrating radar maps the interior in 3D without breaking a single stone. Stationary laser scanners send millions of beams, recording each reflection to build a digital twin so precise it captures even the smallest crack. Compact robots, fitted with cameras and sensors, are released into ventilation shafts barely wide enough for a hand, places no person can reach. One of the most intriguing finds in recent years came in 2017, when the Scan Pyramids project used muon tomography, tracking cosmic particles as they pass through stone, to reveal a vast hidden void above the grand gallery of Khufu's pyramid. The chamber is tens of meters long, and to this day, no one has entered it. It may be part of the load-bearing structure, or it may be a ceremonial space never before known. The answer remains under study. Robots have also filmed a small stone door deep inside a ventilation shaft of the Queen's chamber. The door has copper handles, and behind it lies another empty space, a mystery behind a mystery. Some believe it is a false door to symbolic chambers, used in rituals to link the pharaoh's soul with the gods. Others suggest it hides offerings or sacred texts. Not every discovery is made public right away, partly because findings must be confirmed, and partly because all data is under strict control of the Egyptian government. Some scans, images, and measurements are shared only among research teams to avoid unfounded speculation. For the public, only selected information is revealed, just enough to spark curiosity without risking the monument's safety. And still, archaeologists admit. Even with advanced technology, much of the pyramid's interiors remain beyond reach. Some corridors are too narrow, some chambers have been locked behind stone for 4,500 years, and any breach risks irreversible damage. For those who enter, the experience is not purely scientific. Standing alone in the grand gallery, a tall, narrow corridor with corbelled walls, you feel a silence almost physical, thick and weighty. Even knowing you are inside a man-made structure, it is like standing before a space with its own presence, quietly watching. The laser light sweeps across the stone, capturing its form. On the screen, the structure slowly appears, the shafts, the hidden chambers, the massive blocks, a kind of X-ray for the pyramid. Yet no matter how exact, this digital map is only the shadow of what is here. The rituals, the prayers, the human hands that placed each stone, those remain beyond the reach of technology. When you step back out into the desert's blinding light, you realize something. We know more physics, more mathematics, more material science than our ancestors. And yet the pyramid still keeps its secrets, like a silent guest, revealing only fragments to those who are patient and who approach with respect. In the next part, we will turn to another view, not of what lies inside, but of what lies beyond, how the pyramid and its surrounding monuments align with the sky, with the stars, and with the belief that the universe and the soul could meet at a single point. Afternoon on the Giza Plateau. The desert wind carries fine sand into every crevice of stone. Footsteps whisper in the shadowed corridors. In a burial chamber sealed for thousands of years, the beam of a flashlight cuts through the dark, glancing off rows of faint golden hieroglyphs on the wall. Reading closely, you find a line written in a formal hand. Death will come swiftly to he who disturbs the Pharaoh's sleep. It is more than a warning. To the ancient Egyptians, it was a sacred binding, part of a belief system in which the afterlife was inseparable from the world of the living. In their culture, death was not an end. It was a journey into another realm, where the soul needed protection to be reborn forever. The tomb, with its mummy, its grave goods, and its burial rites, was a sacred closed space, both a home and a doorway to the next life. To shield it from intrusion, the Egyptians used layers of defense, architectural tricks to mislead, simple mechanical traps, and words of power. These warnings might be carved at the entrance, painted on a coffin, or inscribed on the chamber walls. Not all spoke of death. Some promised illness, loss of memory, or divine punishment. They were not spells in the Western sense, but assertions of authority from the gods of protection, Anubis, keeper of the mummy, or Osiris, lord of the dead. When Howard Carter and his team opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, newspapers quickly seized on the idea of a curse. In truth, no inscription in the tomb contained an explicit curse. But only months later, Lord Carnarvon, one of the expedition's chief backers, died of blood poisoning from a mosquito bite. The news spread, and the press of the time linked it instantly to the Pharaoh's curse. They embellished the story with lists of other deaths, illnesses, or accidents involving those who had entered the tomb, regardless of how many years later, or how ordinary the cause. The tale of the curse erupted into a global phenomenon. It not only fed the West's fascination with Egyptology, but made the curse part of popular culture itself. In the ancient world, such warnings worked on a psychological level. In a society that believed deeply in divine power, a sacred threat was enough to make a tomb robber hesitate. Whether real or not, belief alone could turn an intruder back. In the modern world, the curse took on another life. When tombs were opened and images of gold, statues, and jewelry filled the papers, the public felt both awe and a sense that Something had been violated. The curse became a story both romantic and unsettling, satisfying curiosity while also marking a boundary. Some scientists suggest that part of the curse might have been real, but in an entirely natural way. In the sealed air of an ancient tomb, mold, bacteria, or toxic gases could build up. Those who entered might breathe them in and fall ill, especially if already in poor health. For the ancients, such sickness would be the gods' punishment. For us, it becomes a scientific explanation. Whatever the reason, the Pharaoh's curse has become inseparable from the modern image of ancient Egypt. It appears in novels, films, even in the way museums display artifacts, creating a symbolic forbidden zone between the viewer and the object. For Egyptologists, it is also a reminder of archaeological ethics, that opening a tomb is not just breaking stone, but opening a part of someone's soul. The name, the image, the objects buried, all are pieces of an identity. To disturb that wholeness, even for knowledge, is an act that must be weighed. When you leave a chamber long forgotten and step back into the desert sun, you may wonder, is the curse real? Or is it we ourselves, through imagination and guilt, who have written it? Whatever the answer, the Pharaoh's curse endures. Not because it kills, but because it touches the deepest human mix of fear and reverence in the face of death and the hope of immortality. Dawn on the west bank of the Nile. The sun has just risen above the horizon, its soft light resting on the stone colonnades of the mortuary temple. A quiet procession moves along the paved causeway toward the desert. They carry ceramic jars, bundles of lotus flowers, and wooden chests filled with offerings. The soft rattle of sistrums mingles with the scent of resin smoke curling from small braziers. In the center, a bier draped in white linen embroidered with green and gold thread is borne by 4 men. Beneath the cloth lies the body of the deceased, embalmed in a process that took many days. In Egyptian belief, this is not simply a departure from this world, it is preparation for a long journey to another, where life continues forever. Mummification was not only about preserving the body. The Egyptians believed the soul, made of parts such as Ka, Ba, and Ak, needed an intact home to return to at night, or to receive energy from offerings. To lose the body was to lose the chance of rebirth. The embalmers worked in a chamber open to the desert, letting the dry wind and sunlight aid in removing moisture. They used natron, a natural mineral salt, to draw every trace of dampness from the body. The internal organs were removed, treated separately, and placed into 4 canopic jars, each sealed with the head of a protective deity. After many weeks, the body was wrapped in layer upon layer of linen, with amulets and bead strings placed between the folds. Each wrapping was both a physical shield and a layer of magical protection. Once the body was placed in the coffin, the funeral began. Priests led the way, reciting prayers to ask Anubis to guide the dead, Osiris to open the gates of the afterlife, and Thoth to record the name in the Book of the Accepted. The opening of the mouth ritual was performed. A copper or stone tool touched lightly to the lips, eyes, and ears, symbolically restoring the senses so the dead could eat, speak, and see in the next world. The music beat slow and steady, like the steps of a journey that cannot be hurried and cannot be stopped. According to belief, the soul would pass through many gates, each guarded by gods with questions and tests before reaching the hall of Ma'at. Here, the heart, the seat of memory and conscience, was placed on the scales opposite the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was lighter than or equal to the feather, the soul could enter the field of reeds. If heavier, weighed down with lies and wrongdoing, It would be devoured by the creature Ammit, and the soul would vanish forever. There was no eternal hell, only the complete end of existence, a fate more feared than any punishment. The field of reeds was the vision of an ideal world, a reflection of earthly Egypt without sickness, hunger, or hardship. Its fields were always fertile, the rivers always full, the harvests always abundant. Families reunited, friends met again, and the soul lived the life it had always wished for. Light work, worship of the gods, and endless peace. To reach it, the dead needed not only a pure heart, but the right prayers and spells, many copied into the Book of the Dead and placed in the coffin as a guide. When archaeologists open a tomb, they often find not just a mummy, but a whole miniature world. Pottery, chairs, beds, small servant figurines, shabti, dried food, even model boats. Each item had meaning. The servants would labor in the afterlife in place of the deceased. The boat would carry them along the mythic river. Amulets would guard against evil spirits. Even mirrors and jewelry were placed so the dead could keep their beauty. The richness of these goods depended on status in life. A pharaoh might be buried with gold, gems, and monumental statues, a farmer with a few jars of grain and a loaf of bread. But the principle was the same: to prepare for the life to come. When the funeral ended, the tomb was sealed with great stone blocks. From that moment, the Egyptians believed the journey truly began. The living returned to their daily rhythms. The soul traveled on, through gates of darkness, through the questions of the gods, and at last, if accepted, into a place where the light never dies. Standing on the west bank of the Nile at sunset, looking towards the silent tombs in the mountain's shadow, you can almost imagine the countless journeys that began here. No footsteps, no farewells, only the desert wind, the river, and the enduring belief that life doesn't end at the grave. Late afternoon on the limestone plateau. The sunlight has turned gold, and the shadows of the pyramids stretch all the way to the edge of the desert. Standing here, your eyes trace the perfect, improbable lines of the edges. A question seems to hang in the warm, dry air. How, thousands of years ago, did people without modern machinery raise this into being? The white limestone reflects the light softly, but with force, its faces aligned precisely to the 4 cardinal points. Each block, weighing tons, fits to the next with near-perfect precision. It is not only a question of engineering, but of will and of the organization of an ancient society. For decades, archaeologists, engineers, and historians have proposed many building theories. The most common imagines long ramps rising from the desert floor to each level of the pyramid, perhaps a straight incline stretching for kilometers, or a spiral wrapping around the structure. Some suggest an internal ramp, temporary corridors cut within the pyramid's body, later sealed. Others point to primitive pulleys and wooden cranes. Another idea holds that some blocks were not quarried whole, but cast in place from a mixture of pulverized limestone, water, and natural binders, an ancient form of limestone concrete. Each theory has its strengths and weaknesses, and none has yet been proven beyond doubt. Step back and consider the scale of coordination. This could not have been merely a feat of stonework. Building a pyramid required tens of thousands of workers, quarrymen at Tura and Aswan, boatmen along the Nile, crews setting each block in place on site. The work had to follow the rhythms of flood and dry season. When the river was high, boats could deliver stone close to the site. When it receded, the ground was firm enough to raise ramps and drag materials. Schedules, rations, and housing had to be planned. Archaeological evidence from the workers' village at Giza shows they were fed bread, beer, onions, and dried fish, a diet to sustain hard labor. Some skeletons bear healed injuries, proof they received medical care. A far cry from the image of enslaved labor many still imagine. The surrounding complex deepens the mystery. Mortuary temples at the pyramid's base carried out rituals for the deceased pharaoh, linked by paved causeways hundreds of meters long to valley temples on the Nile's edge. These were not only for moving materials during construction, but for carrying the royal body and holding annual ceremonies. Nearby, smaller pyramids for queens and deep boat pits holding intact wooden vessels, like Khufu's 40-meter-long ship, found and preserved in remarkable condition. The ship was not just a symbol of royal authority, but a vessel for the pharaoh's soul to sail into the afterlife. Another layer of enigma lies in the bond between architecture and the sky. The exact alignment of the pyramid's faces to the compass points and the connection of its internal passages to stars such as the Pole Star or Orion's Belt lead some to believe it was more than a tomb, perhaps a ritual machine binding kingship to the cosmos. The passages may have channeled sunlight or starlight on specific days tied to festivals or agricultural cycles. It raises the question, could the pyramid have been a tool to measure time, forecast seasons, or speak to generations yet unborn? Modern archaeological technology has added pieces to the puzzle, and with them, new questions. Ground-penetrating radar, 3D laser scans, and satellite imaging have revealed unusual voids within Khufu's pyramid and others. The Scan Pyramids project, using muon tomography to X-ray the entire mass, uncovered a long hidden chamber above the Grand Gallery, never entered. Its purpose is unknown, perhaps a ritual space, a storeroom, or simply part of the weight-relieving design. Inside narrow ventilation shafts from the Queen's chamber, camera-fitted robots have filmed small stone doors with copper handles, opening to yet another space. Are they spiritual conduits for the soul? Or do they conceal sacred objects? The answers remain sealed. Not every discovery is shared at once. Time is needed for verification, and Egypt's laws protect its heritage closely. Some images and scans circulate only within research teams to avoid a flood of speculation. It leaves the public with the sense that the pyramids still keep untold secrets. Yet mystery is not only in what is hidden. Even in what we see, questions remain. Why seal one passage instead of dismantling it? Why are some burial chambers empty? Could some pyramids have been built for other purposes and only later turned into tombs? And why did this form, perfected at Giza, eventually give way to cliff-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings? To the ancient Egyptians, there was likely no contradiction in a structure being tomb, power symbol, religious instrument, and astronomical device all at once. For us, the habit of separating purposes makes full understanding harder. Perhaps the greatest secret of the pyramids is not in their engineering, but in how they unite the physical and the spiritual, the practical and the symbolic, into a single form. Standing at the base at sunset, desert wind streaming through stone seams, the pale red light folding over vast sloping faces, time seems to slow. Each block is a story, each joint a human hand's trace. Yet the whole keeps for itself a silence, like a reserved guest revealing only glimpses to those patient enough, respectful enough, to listen. It may be that this, holding something back, is what keeps them alive in our minds. Questions hanging over the desert under a star-filled sky, daring anyone to think they have understood the past completely. And as you turn away, the stone causeway leading back toward the Nile suggests another thought. If these secrets are never meant to be fully revealed, perhaps that was the builder's intention. A gift for the future and a challenge, so that we never stop searching. Segment 4. Social, Elite, Contrasting Daily Life, Part 16 to 20. Early morning in Memphis. A thin mist drifts into the cooking smoke, rising from the crowded neighborhoods along the eastern bank of the Nile. From narrow dirt lanes, farmers, craftsmen, and traders set out to begin their day. They wear simple linen garments, barefoot or in palm fiber sandals, carrying baskets, hoes, or goods. This is the class that makes up the vast majority of ancient Egypt's population, the people who produce the food, tools, and services that keep the whole society running. Their status is low, but not without rights. Farmers are allocated land by the state or temples in return for paying taxes in crops or labor. In the flood season, when the fields lie underwater, they are drafted to build dikes, canals, or public works. Craftsmen, from carpenters and potters to stonecutters and goldsmiths, work on commission for temples, the court, or major merchants. Their income depends on their skill, and the most talented can earn respect in their communities. Merchants travel along the Nile or across desert routes, trading grain, beer, cloth, timber, and luxury goods from Nubia or the Levant. They pay commercial taxes, but benefit from connections with officials and the wealthy. One tier above them are the administrators and officials. These are the literate men who know the law and manage taxes, record harvests, and coordinate labor. They work in temple offices, the royal palace, or provincial seats. Their power does not come from muscle, but from access to information and documents, something most commoners will never have. Trained as scribes, they can read and write hieroglyphs and administrative scripts, and carry the state seal. This grants them privileges, steady income, rights to use land, and sometimes exemption from heavy labor. Many officials live in large houses with courtyards, gardens, and servants. Their children are educated and can even rise into positions at court. Higher still are the priesthood and the royal family. Great temples are not only places of worship, but economic centers, owning land, granaries, and their own labor forces. High-ranking priests manage vast wealth, oversee festivals, and advise the pharaoh in religious matters. They take a share of offerings, wear fine garments, and possess luxuries such as gold jewelry, incense, and imported wine. The royal family, from princes and princesses to the pharaoh, live in palaces decorated with painted walls, carved stone columns, and furniture of rare woods. Their diet is rich and varied, from cattle and river fish to rare fruits, and beer and wine are served in ritual as well as in leisure. This hierarchy is both stable and closed. Movement from one class to another is rare, except in unusual cases. A master craftsman receiving patronage, a wealthy merchant buying land and titles, or an official rewarded with nobility for great service. For most, status is decided at birth, and people spend their lives in the same social position as their parents. Rights and duties are tied to class. Farmers and craftsmen produce goods and labor, merchants pay taxes, officials and priests manage and distribute. The royal family issues decrees and upholds Mayat, the cosmic order. The division is visible in where people live. Farmers inhabit small mud brick houses with flat roofs, few windows, clustered close together. Craftsmen often live near their workshops or markets. Officials and the wealthy have larger homes with multiple rooms, gardens, and sometimes artificial pools for cooling. The royal and high priestly residences are palaces or compounds, guarded and adorned with fine furnishings. The physical distance between these quarters mirrors the gap in power and wealth. Each class enjoys certain rights: protection under the law, participation in religious ceremonies, and the benefits of stability provided by a centralized state. But their obligations are equally clear and binding. Farmers must surrender much of their harvest. Craftsmen must work on state orders when called. Merchants are subject to toll stations. Officials must remain loyal and submit reports. Priests must ensure no ritual is interrupted. The royal family must act as the bridge between the divine and the human. The entire system runs in careful balance to maintain the pharaoh's authority and the order of society, while also keeping everyone in their place. In one corner of the market, a farmer trades a basket of onions for a river fish. A few streets away, an official sits in his garden courtyard, reading the latest grain tallies. Farther still, in the palace, the pharaoh receives an envoy from a distant land. The same morning, the same city, yet their worlds are separated by walls both visible and invisible. Each class depends on the labor of the others, and in turn is needed by them. But the gap in power and privilege shapes entirely different experiences of life. It is in that gap that we can see the true cost of keeping a society stable for thousands of years. Evening in the estate of a noble in Thebes. Torchlight and the glow of oil lamps wash over walls painted with lotus blossoms, water birds, and hunting scenes. In the wide, stone-paved courtyard, pools of water lilies and lotus reflect the flicker of light, while the scent of resin and fresh flowers blends with the cool air. Guests, officials, wealthy merchants, and at times envoys from distant lands pass through the great gate, greeted by rows of servants in spotless white linen, silver trays and wine jugs in hand. This is the banquet of Egypt's elite, a world far removed from the mud-brick homes of common folk, where food, music, and ceremony serve as displays of both power and refinement. The menu has been in preparation for hours, even days. Beef, lamb, and poultry roast over charcoal, fat dripping with a gentle hiss, sending a savory aroma through the garden. Nile fish, perch, carp, are grilled or stewed with herbs and spices brought in from the Levant. The bread is baked from flour far finer than that eaten day to day, sometimes mixed with honey or mashed dates. Vegetables, onions, garlic, coriander, beans, are set out in generous platters. Fresh fruit such as grapes, figs, pomegranates, and melons are piled high on bronze trays. Special luxuries, wine from the Levant, or well-aged barley beer, appear only for important occasions. Music begins once the guests are settled on low stools or cushioned seats. The ensemble includes large harps, lyres, reed flutes, and hand drums. Musicians, often women or trained slaves, sit in a row at one corner of the court, weaving a soft but steady soundscape. Harp notes stretch and linger, flute tones thread through them, while drums and sistrums, metal rattling instruments, keep a quiet rhythm. The pace is slow at first, creating a relaxed mood, then swells during the high points when the dishes are served. Between melodies, singers perform songs of the gods, of victories, or of romantic tales, each chosen to honor the host and his class. Entertainment is not limited to music. Dancers in light garments, ankle and wrist bracelets chiming, move with fluid precision to the drum beat. Tables with Senet, an ancient board game, invite guests to try their luck. Sometimes a storyteller recites the legends of the gods or campaigns from ages past. Every element is part of a continuous flow, keeping the atmosphere alive without chaos, like a slow river with sudden eddies of movement. The wine-pouring ritual is a key moment. When the jars arrive, servants pour from high above into gold or silver cups, letting the dark red or golden liquid fall in a fine stream. The gesture is for spectacle as much as for generosity. Wine is not drained in a single gulp, but sipped with a toast for the health and long life of the host. On occasion, An honored guest is invited to pour for the others, a sign of respect and connection. In this culture, sharing wine is a way to seal social bonds and signal status. Throughout the night, servants move constantly, changing plates, replenishing dishes, refilling cups. They move almost without a sound, though the courtyard is crowded with guests and performers. Everything is precisely arranged. Seating close to the host is prestigious, outer places rank lower, dishes arrive in a set order. This is not simply a meal, but a performance of soft power, proof of wealth, command of resources, and the cohesion of the elite. For those invited, a place at the table is itself a recognition of rank. Meanwhile, only a few streets away, ordinary families finish their day with coarse bread and thick beer, gathered around a small oil lamp. They might catch a faint trace of music on the night air, but the world it comes from is closed to them. The gap between the noble's feast and the commoner's supper is not only in the food, but in power, security, and influence. And that contrast underscores the price of survival in ancient Egypt. For a few to live in luxury, many must sustain the daily grind, from farming to hauling, that supplies every element of such banquets. As the night deepens, the music slows, the oil lamps burn low. Guests take their leave, carrying with them the taste of roast meat, the warmth of wine, and the conversations shared at the table. The host stands at the gate, smiling in farewell, though his eyes are tired. The banquet ends, but its social effect, alliances strengthened, agreements hinted at, will linger far longer. And the next morning, when hoes strike the soil and markets open, the cycle begins again. Labor feeds luxury, and luxury fortifies power. Morning in the inner courtyard of a palace in Thebes. The first light of day slips across carved stone columns, casting gold across the surfaces of reliefs. Servants move quietly, carrying cedar chests imported from the Levant, filled with garments and ornaments for their master, a noble or a member of the royal household. For the elite of ancient Egypt, clothing and jewelry were never just for wear or beauty. They were a language of power, a badge of rank, a sign of religious role in society. A single outfit, a string of beads, a crown. From these alone, one could guess a person's place in the tightly bound hierarchy. The basic fabric, even for nobles, was still linen, but nothing like the rough kind worn by farmers. It was woven from fine flax fibers, bleached or tinted with natural dyes. Men's garments often took the form of kilts or short pleated skirts, worn high at the waist, paired with capes or light shawls draped over the shoulders. Noble women wore long, close-fitting dresses with or without shoulder straps, tailored to shape the body. Many were adorned with glass beads, polished shell, or even thin sheets of gold. Every pleat and fold was pressed flat with burnished stones and kept carefully in chests lined with soft cloth. But the clearest sign of power was in the jewelry. Gold was supreme, not only for its beauty, but for its religious meaning. The Egyptians believed gold was the flesh of the gods, immune to tarnish, symbol of immortality. Wide collars, wesek, were fashioned from dozens of pieces of gold, precious stones, and colored glass, laid in symmetrical rows. Imported stones, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, carnelian from the eastern desert, turquoise from the Sinai, were chosen for their symbolism. Lapis blue for the sky and rebirth, carnelian red-orange for blood and vitality, turquoise green for protection and good fortune. Bracelets, anklets, and rings were equally elaborate, many carved with the scarab, symbol of the rising sun and daily renewal. Large rings often bore the owner's name within an oval cartouche, both as a signature and a charm. Crowns and headpieces were the summit of ornamental power. Pharaohs and queens wore different crowns for different rites: the white crown of Upper Egypt, the red of Lower Egypt, or the double crown uniting both. The Nemes headdress, striped blue and gold, was the royal emblem often seen in statues and reliefs. At its brow sat the golden uraeus serpent, poised to spit fire in mythic defense of its master. Beyond display, jewelry carried deep religious weight. Many pieces took the form of gods or sacred signs: the falcon-headed Horus for protection, the wedjot eye of Horus for health and safety, the Ankh for eternal life. When attending ceremonies, nobles would choose jewelry that honored the deity of the day. Each piece was made to strict proportions and forms, ensuring it was ritually correct and acceptable to the gods. Goldsmiths and jewelers worked in private workshops within palaces or temples. Using small hammers, chisels, and polishing stones, they shaped and finished each detail. Their craft demanded both technical precision and knowledge of symbolism, for an error was not only a flaw in workmanship, but in ritual meaning. A single collar could take months to complete, from cutting stones and gilding to the final assembly. Noble jewelry was kept locked in chests, brought out only for use, then cleaned and wrapped in soft linen for storage. For common people, gold or gemstones were rare. They might wear bracelets of bone, wood, or copper, and dyed cloth was already a luxury. The visual gap between classes was unmistakable. One glance at a garment or necklace, and one knew a person's rank. The difference was not just to distinguish, but to remind, a visible sign of the social order, one everyone was expected to see and recognize. At banquets or temple rites, torch and lamplight caught on gold and gems, creating a halo around the powerful. This was more than a pleasing effect. It was a wordless message. Wealth and authority radiated outward, drawing the gaze and commanding respect. These same adornments followed their owners into the tomb as provisions for the next world. Archaeologists opening ancient graves have found collars intact, rings, crowns, and headdresses still gleaming after thousands of years. Outside the palace, farmers still ground grain, hauled water, and worked in the sun. They knew gold and gems belonged to another world, the world of the few with power and privilege. But the very existence of such symbols helped hold the system together. They made rank tangible, unmistakable, and difficult to change. In a society that saw order, mayat, as sacred, wearing what belonged to you was not just courtesy, but duty. And so, from sunrise to sunset, gold still shimmered in the palace, while in the riverside villages, sunlight fell on plain linen. Two worlds ran side by side, linked by trade routes and obligations, yet sharply divided in every thread, every sheet of gold, every polished stone. Passing through the great gates of the royal palace in Thebes feels like stepping into a world completely apart from the bustle of the markets and the sound of oars on the Nile. High walls of stone and mud brick, washed in white lime, encircle the grounds, shutting out both the desert wind and the curious eyes of the outside. Inside, the spaces are arranged in a perfect balance of grandeur and comfort. Every corner, every passage designed with a purpose, from political ceremony to the private life of the royal household. The palace's architecture is more than walls and roofs. The great halls are raised on high platforms, their massive columns painted in vivid colors: lotus, papyrus, and waterfowl, familiar motifs in Egyptian symbolism. Floors are paved in baked brick or stone, cool even in the hottest months. Ceilings rest on great beams, sometimes painted deep blue and dotted with gold to mimic a night sky. Light filters through tall, narrow windows, falling in long strips that create the stillness of a temple. Every element here is not only for beauty, but a reminder that this is the seat of the highest power. Beyond the great halls, long corridors lead to the palace gardens, an artificial oasis in the desert. Trees are planted in neat rows, date palms, sycamores, acacias, and rare imports from distant lands. Stone paths lead to rectangular pools, their still water reflecting the sky and the trees. Water is drawn from canals linked to the Nile, lifted by shadufs, and carried through channels by laborers or slaves. The pools are not only for beauty, but for fish and for lotus and water lilies, flowers tied to the symbols of rebirth and the rising sun. Here in the gardens, you hear bird song and the wind in the leaves, so different from the noise beyond the walls. Stone benches and small fountains are set for members of the royal family to rest, receive close guests, or simply enjoy the view. Everything is maintained with precision by the gardeners, who trim every branch, refresh the pools, and keep each part in perfect order. Audiences take place in a great hall or a roofed court, where the pharaoh or a representative sits on a high throne, backed by painted scenes of the gods granting him power. Visitors are led in by a separate route, passing guards in padded armor, holding spears and shields. They bow or kneel, following fixed ritual steps, presenting gifts, speaking blessings, waiting for permission to speak. Every gesture, the way one stands, offers a hand, or lifts the head, is prescribed to maintain absolute dignity. These audiences are not just moments for discussion, but displays of power before the whole court. Behind the ceremonial spaces lie the private quarters of the royal family, rooms opening onto gardens or pools. Here, quiet is carefully maintained. The only sounds are the soft steps of servants or the trickle of water into a stone basin. Furnishings include wooden beds with linen mattresses, chests, cupboards, and low tables. On the tables might rest a jar of lotus flowers, pottery vessels of scented oil, and jewelry waiting to be worn. The air always carries fragrance, a blend of imported resin, fresh flowers, and clean linen. This stillness is not natural, but controlled. Servants are trained to move and work without noise. Activities follow a strict schedule to avoid disturbance, every detail serving the aim of order and calm. In such an environment, even the smallest sounds, birdsong, wind, the pour of water, stand out as part of a greater composition. Yet behind this peace lies a tight web of control. Every door and passage has a guard. Visitors are recorded and inspected. News moves through official channels, and important conversations take place only where no one but the chosen can hear. Life in the palace is thus a blend of luxury, comfort, and discipline. It is the center of the nation's power, where decisions are made on war, taxes, and sacred rites. When the sun sets, golden light spreads across the whole palace, reflected in the pools and on carved reliefs. From outside, the palace appears as a silent fortress. From within, it is its own world, enclosed, ordered, and fully under the control of those at the height of authority. For commoners, it is distant and mysterious. For those who live within, it is both home and stage, where every day unfolds like a ceremony shaped by centuries of tradition. As darkness settles over the east bank of the Nile, you, an imagined guest, realize you have survived a full day in ancient Egypt. From the moment you opened your eyes at dawn, hearing the wind against mud-brick walls, feeling the damp of night dew through a thin sheet of linen, to this hour when the young moon glimmers on the water, every sensation lingers like a fine layer of dust over your skin. It is the dust of sweat, of sand, of a rhythm that never stops, the dust of a world where survival itself is a full-time task. Your body is tired to the bone. Bare feet, accustomed to cracked earth, still flinch at the touch of pebbles cooled from the day's heat. Your shoulders and back ache from the weight of work, hauling water, grinding grain, or simply enduring the sun. You recall the morning by the river, the smell of reeds and wet silt, the soft call of ibis hunting, the practiced gestures of villagers as they filled jars and rinsed linen. You remember a breakfast plain but heavy with grit, a piece of emmer bread, a cup of thick beer, a few sweet dates, fuel for the hours ahead. You have seen two parallel worlds, the fields and work sites where ordinary people labor under a blinding sun, and across the divide, the lavish feasts, palace gardens, and gold-bright ornaments of the elite. In a single day, you have stepped through both spaces and felt that the distance between them is measured not just in geography, but in invisible walls of status, authority, and control. Inside the palace, everything is arranged to maintain a kind of absolute stillness, almost sacred. Beyond its gates, the clang of hammers, the thud of pestles, the voices calling across the village carry without pause. You understand that stillness is not born of nature. It is bought with the labor of thousands, day after day. For one banquet to take place, someone must plow under the sun, draw water from the river, grind grain until arms shake. For a perfect necklace to shine on a noble's neck, someone must cut every stone, hammer each sheet of gold, and carve each symbol with eyes straining and hands trembling from fatigue. Now, as night has fallen, the sound of drums and harps drifts faintly from afar, mingling with the murmur of water in the channels. You sit outside a mud-brick house, watching the glow of oil lamps in doorways. The smell of cooking smoke still lingers, mixed with the scent of river reeds. Your eyes grow heavy, yet your mind tries to hold the images of the day. Harsh sunlight, wind carrying sand, the plain meals, the tanned faces, and the high walls where power lives. Compared to the present, the gap feels almost beyond imagining. Tomorrow, you will not wake to sunlight on your face. Curtains and cool air will guard your room. You will not walk barefoot on hot ground. Soft shoes and paved roads will carry you. Water will flow clean from a tap, not from the river. Breakfast may be coffee, fresh bread, chilled fruit, untouched by sand. Your work, if in an office, will not wear your muscles the way plowing or hauling stone does. And in the evening, you will eat by electric light, hear music from a device, and lie down with clean sheets and a soft pillow. Yet in that comfort, you may realize that ancient Egyptians lived in deep alignment with natural rhythms, the sun, the flood, the rituals binding their community. They understood the value of shared labor, of respecting social order, even if that order feels unjust to modern eyes. They lived with an intense awareness of the afterlife, making every act in life carry weight beyond the present. So, if you truly had to live one more day in ancient Egypt, could you? Not just endure the heat, sand, and heavy work, but accept your place in a system that almost never changes? Could you find joy in small things? A breeze off the river? A sweet date? A brief conversation by the fire? Or would you count the hours until you could return to the comforts you know? The answer will differ for each listener. But one truth remains. Imagining a day in ancient Egypt will make you see the present with new eyes, more grateful for what you have, more curious about what people once endured to bring us here. History, whether distant or near, is always a mirror, showing us how much we have changed and reminding us of what has never changed at all. You've walked with me through a full day in ancient Egypt, from the first breath of morning on the Nile to the cool, moonlit stillness of night. You've felt the heat, the sand, the weight of labor, and the distance between the common home and the palace walls. As you return to the comfort of your bed, no desert wind, no watchful overseer, remember that history for sleeping will always be here, with more boring history for sleep, ready to be told in the unhurried voice of a sleepy historian. And if you're still awake, you can let another history to fall asleep story carry you further into rest. Thank you for joining me. Sleep well, and I'll see you on our next quiet journey.